She had never felt grass. She had never stood on soft ground. Not in the whole of her life, not before the war, not during it. The enclosure they kept her in was a converted horse stable, roughly 4 meters by 4 meters, just outside Kyiv. Concrete floor, metal walls. The constant sound of artillery in the distance, sometimes close. Air raid sirens, the deep percussion of Russian bombardment shaking the structure above her head. That was her world, a cage in a war zone. A space barely large enough to pace in, belonging to an illegal private owner who had no business keeping a Eurasian lynx in the first place. She did not know what grass felt like. She did not know what silence felt like. She had never had a real home. On July 23, 2026, in a field in Kent, England, a lynx named Ursa stepped out of an enclosure door and pressed her paws, for the very first time in her life, into soft turf. She stood there, felt it beneath her. Everything she had never had, right there, under her feet. Subscribe right now. We are here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for stories like this one. Animals who survived what they should not have survived, and humans who refused to let them stay broken. Hit that button. This is worth your time. The story of how Ursa got from that horse stable near Kyiv to a purpose-built enclosure at the Big Cat Sanctuary in Headcorn, Kent, is not a short one. It involves a fundraising campaign, a 1,400-mile cross-border journey through active conflict zones, 5 months of careful quarantine and preparation, and a managing director named Whitnall who drove into a war zone in winter to bring a lynx home. Let us start from the beginning. Ursa was a Eurasian lynx, a species that, in the wild, ranges across the forests of Europe and Central Asia, capable of traveling dozens of miles through snow, hunting in silence, disappearing into wilderness. In the wild, they are almost impossible to see. In captivity, illegally, on a concrete floor outside Kyiv, Ursa was very easy to see. She just could not get out. How long she had been in that stable before anyone outside Ukraine knew about her is not entirely clear. What is clear is that by early 2026, war had transformed everything around her. Russian forces were advancing and retreating in cycles. The outskirts of Kyiv were regularly targeted. The enclosure she lived in offered no real protection. It was a shell, a repurposed farm building, surrounded by the infrastructure of a country fighting for its life. Whitnall heard about her. He is the managing director of the Big Cat Sanctuary in Kent, and when he learned that a Eurasian lynx was living in those conditions, in -15-degree temperatures, with air raid sirens going off above her, with bomb threats becoming routine, he did not conclude that it was impossible to help. He concluded that he had to try. The Big Cat Sanctuary launched an emergency fundraising campaign in January 2026. The target was £100,000, enough to fund her evacuation and the construction of a purpose-built enclosure that would actually meet the needs of a Eurasian lynx. The British public responded. By the time the campaign closed, £134,152 had been raised, more than the ask, enough to do it right. Whitnall led the mission himself. He traveled to Ukraine, into an active war zone, in winter, in those -15 conditions, to bring Ursa out. The journey home covered 1,400 miles, cross-border logistics in a time of active conflict, paperwork and permits, and the constant possibility that something would go wrong. He got her out. Ursa arrived in Kent in February 2026.
If you have stayed with this story, subscribe. We are here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Hit that button right now. Stories like this are the reason we do this. February to July. 5 months between her arrival and the moment she stepped onto grass. Those 5 months were not idle. They were deliberate. A purpose-built enclosure had to be completed, designed specifically for a Eurasian lynx with space to move, to climb, to behave like the animal she was always meant to be. Quarantine had to be observed. Ursa needed time to decompress, to begin to understand that the sounds outside were not artillery, that no one was going to come in and harm her, that the floor beneath her, still concrete in the interim space, was not the whole of the world. By July, the enclosure was ready. The Big Cat Sanctuary in Headcorn, Kent is holding its Big Cat Fest from July 29th to August 2nd and August 5th through August 9th. Anyone who wants to see Ursa in her new home and the enclosure that was built for her can go. She will be there, on her ground, in her space, in the country that raised £134,000 to bring her home from a war zone. A Eurasian lynx who was kept in a converted horse stable outside Kyiv in the middle of a war, on a concrete floor for years, is now in Kent, in a purpose-built enclosure, on grass, for the first time in her life. The world is not always good, but sometimes, just sometimes, it does something like this. Thank you for watching. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and share it. We are here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Every video is an animal or a person who needed a second chance and got one. We will be back Wednesday. Until then, thank you.